Are we on?
We're on.
Okay, well, all right, here we go. Our inaugural little app safety label unboxing podcast thing, which, as you can tell, is not currently
Yeah.
named.
To be determined.
We're working on a name. And in light of the Surgeon General's call for warning labels on social media platforms this week, we've been all abuzz at Internet Safety Labs because we've been providing safety labels for mobile apps since last year. And so, in an effort to try to get more people aware of our safety labels, we're doing this. Ta-da!
Mhm.
So, so I'm Lisa LeVasseur, and this
Uh,
is
I'm Bryce Simpson.
there we go. We'll get better at this, folks. I think. I hope.
Yeah,
um,
only way, only up from here.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Have faith. Um, okay, so what we're going to do today is we're going to introduce you all to what our safety labels look like. And going forward, what we might do is actually show safety labels that we've never seen, and or bring someone in who's never seen a safety label so that we can experience kind of the novelty and freshness of seeing our wonderful labels for the very first time. So the label we chose for today's unboxing event is the worst app in our database. And our database, which you can see in appmicroscope.org, is right now strictly includes apps that were found in our 2022 K-12 EdTech benchmark. So these are EdTech related apps for the most part, and there's a little over 1,700 of these labels. And we're always working on building more labels, but right now the majority of them are the EdTech related ones. And also the scoring really right now relates for risk to children. When we created the scoring rubric that you'll see in the label, it was really with an eye towards what's acceptable for K-12 students, and we don't really adhere to the 13-year-old sort of arbitrary demarcation that COPPA uses. And in fact, we think everybody deserves to be safe using technology. And like strictly speaking, the scores you see are really reflective of the risk for anybody, whether it's a kid or an adult. But that's a topic maybe for another day.
Another
So
podcast.
yeah. So I think without further ado, why don't we start to expose
Yeah,
the label?
let me start showing a little bit.
It
Oh gosh,
was working yesterday.
it was. I
There we
promise
go.
we know sort of what we're doing. All
All
right.
right. Cool. Thanks. So the app we're going to look at is the Palm Beach County School District app. It's the Android version of this. And what you're looking at is the left half of the what we call the app header or the app headline. And it includes some metadata about that app. You can see, first of all, the category is EdTech and the subcategory is Community Engagement Platform. Sidebar note, these community engagement platforms, we've been looking at them since 2021. They are the worst in terms of data sharing, bar none, in all of the apps that we have in here. So it's not really a surprise to see a community engagement platform as really the worst in the batch. And so the owner of this one, or the publisher of this app, is Intrado. And you can see that the last time we tested this was in April of 2022. And that's probably, that's a little while ago, but a lot of this is probably very much the same.
We would hope so.
And yeah, and then in the next line, you can see the schools, the number of schools we found using this app in our benchmark. We looked at 663 schools across the U.S., including all the states and the District of Columbia. So you can get a sense that this app is actually being used in one elementary school for sure. We observe that, which is going to become a little bit interesting later on when we take a look at what's happening in this app. Bear in mind that this is elementary school, so these kids are definitely under the age of 13.
So I did a little bit of looking into the Palm Beach County School District. According to the National Center for Education Statistics, this school district is comprised of 234 schools, and there's approximately 189,000 students within this school district. So this isn't a small district by any means. The number of students and parents who are exposed via this app is significant.
Potentially, yeah. One thing that it's hard to know with these apps, and if we look at like the number of downloads in the App Store on these apps, the numbers aren't terribly impressive, you know.
True.
But I don't know that we know that for sure. So that's a huge school district. So the other data point you see here is whether or not their privacy policy covers children under the age of 13. And already we have questions forming, right? Because the answer says no, and yet the one school that we saw, even though this is a school district app and covers all those schools, the one we saw evidenced was an elementary school. So already your mind is spinning maybe with some questions. So, all right, shall we go to the right-hand side?
Yeah, let's look at the rest of this header.
Okay, so what you see here is an app score. And a few caveats I want to say about the app score. Originally, we were really reluctant to even do an app score, but as you're going to see, there's a lot of information in here, and it needs to be kind of boiled down to a single kind of recommendation. And so we have developed a stoplight score. You'll see 4 different icons in this. You'll see very high risk, which is the highest risk that we have. We have high risk, which is yellow. We have some risk, which is green. That's our best score. And then we have a gray little square for apps that we were unable to fully test or test enough to get a score on. And we published all the details about our scoring rubric, but these information under the score triggers is going to tell you what flipped it such that it warranted this very high risk. And so the composition of the SDKs, the use of WebView APIs in the app, sharing data with platforms like Google and Facebook, behavioral ads is going to immediately flip any app to very high risk. And Max Preps is a particular service for school sports scores. And we've written quite a lot about this. There's a flash, what do we call it, Spotlight report out there. I think it's Spotlight report number 2 or 3. And it goes into a deep dive about the risks associated with Max Preps. So it's kind of a weird, like, where'd this come from? But that's why we happen to know a lot about the risks on that app or that service. And so if we do see that, that does raise some alarm bells for us. So that is the header. And maybe this is enough for you. Like maybe you're like, okay, I'm good, I'm full. That's all I needed to know. But maybe it's not. Maybe you want to know more about what's actually happening. And of course, we aim to serve with our labels. And then the next section that we have is the app safety facts summary. And you can go ahead and open the whole thing there,
okay.
Bryce. I think that's fine. Oh, I forgot how big this is. Yeah. So so this is the next level of granularity of safety fact information. And you can see here there's a header at the top called privacy risks. We have so far only measured privacy risks. So at this point, this label and the app score itself really only concerns itself with privacy risks. That is not where we were going to stop. It's just where we started. So over time, you're going to see more modules, like you're going to see another module for deceptive user interface patterns, also known as dark patterns, or we call them harmful patterns. But there's a number of these modules that we have in mind to audit, and they all relate to different kinds of safety risks. Privacy risks are one particular bundle of safety risks. And so in that header at the top, oh, good. I was wondering if they could see a mouse.
Yes.
Yeah, in the privacy risks header, if you can come down to that, yeah, there you go. So there's 4 red icons in here. These are noteworthy risky things. If they were yellow or green, they would be not risky or less risky things. But these are all risky things, and the red tells you that if you are able to see the red clearly on this. So the number of third parties and the numbers of permissions and types of permissions, the use of web view, and the existence of behavioral ads, those are all high-risk things. So let's go into the next section here. So this is broken up into 4 sections. Hopefully y'all can see that. The first section we think is kind of the most noteworthy. It's the observed network traffic. This is just like what it sounds. This was when our testers tested this in 2022, they turned on network traffic collection, and we have that data. It powers this label. It's not exposed at this time. We just provide some aggregated information on it, but we have analyzed all that network traffic to be able to roll it up and provide this kind of information. So what you see in the observed network traffic section, the first thing you see is what of the 6, I think there are 6.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So there's 6 aggregator platforms, and you can see this one wins.
This has all of them.
Yeah. Yeah. So all 6 aggregator platforms. And aggregator platforms, we're working on refining these, but right now it's Apple, Amazon, Adobe, Facebook, Google, Twitter. Possibly, did we include Microsoft in this version?
Not in this version.
Okay. All right. Okay, so we're going to add Microsoft in, and we're actually going to do some more rigor around that. We got some exciting research about that.
Yes.
Going to be coming out pretty soon here. So anyway, you can see what is true for this app under the This App column, but then you can also see in the app category average what's true of similar apps. So that 414, that is community engagement platform, right? Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. So there were a lot of these in the benchmark, and so what this tells you is it gives you a sense of perspective and context on, well, what's normal for this category, and I want to say something here about why we did that. We did that because we are trying to make sense of what are reasonable norms for this. You know, we categorize what we think the risk level is, but we don't come out and say, like, this is harmful. This will harm you. This will hurt you. We're really dealing with hazards in a lot of this stuff. And every industry has different norms for the kind of expected data sharing. That being said, this one blows it all out of the water. I mean,
yes.
there's nothing okay about this.
Present app excluded.
Yeah, this one is completely out of the norm. But this is just an indication of, like, starting the process of trying to make sense of we're measuring this data, and for the first time, we're objectively measuring privacy risk, trying to objectively measure privacy risk, and make sense of it. And so in order to do that, we wanted to include the category average. So also in this network traffic, you can see the total number of unique companies that were being communicated with by this app. This 117 is extraordinarily high.
Yeah, I don't think we had anything close to this in any other apps.
Yeah, I think I've seen a couple other hundreds, but not. I
Yeah,
don't think.
those are
Yeah,
quite rare.
yeah. And then you can see the industry average or the app category average is only 17. So that gives you a real indication of like, okay, how bad is bad? Well, bad.
Yeah. Well, and that number, that 414, it's a very large sample size too. So that yeah, it just really does go to show that this is so far outside of what is the norm. It's concerning.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, because if this were, I mean, we have some small sample size in there,
Yeah.
like the single sign-on apps, we only had, I think, less than 10 or something in there. So that then you start to get a little, I don't know, the statistical
Yeah.
relevance of this column when we're, but yeah, you're right. 414, this is pretty representative.
Yeah.
So what we did also in the network traffic, and we call it domains, and I want to articulate that this is really subdomains. These are, that's right, isn't
That's
it,
correct.
Bryce?
Yeah.
Yeah. So these are unique subdomains. So there were 482 unique subdomains in this app, and we actually categorized each and every of the thousands and thousands of subdomains that we found across all of the apps. We categorize them by their riskiness, and that's again a story for another day.
Yeah.
But there's a method to our madness, and it's not simple. It's actually
Yeah.
pretty complicated and pretty well thought out. Probably not perfect, but a starting point.
Yeah. And that's episode 2, 3, 4, 5.
10,
Yeah,
20.
we could talk about that
Yeah.
for a long time, and we have.
Yeah. So actually, I am going to be talking about that at the Diana conference in August.
Okay.
Just to put a little plug in for them. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So of those 482, majority of them actually were triggered or rated risky. And more importantly, I think this next one is the thing that really makes my head kind of explode. 23 data broker domains. Again, I'll remind you that we have one elementary school was the source of us even identifying this app. 23 data brokers. Traffic to 23 data brokers. That's a number, and in fact, this number, the number over in the app category average for this, we don't want to see.
Yeah.
That 3.7 is not acceptable. The only acceptable number for data brokers is 0 for apps that children are using, and maybe even adults, but that's another story. Yeah. All right, enough of that. So the other thing, the next section in here looks at the SDKs. So this is not looking at network traffic. This is looking at, we use a service from AppFigures to determine the SDKs that are included in each app. And that's where this information comes from. And just like those subdomains above, we assign them a risk score. So you can see in this one, there are 21 SDKs listed in the app. And 15, again, the majority of these SDKs are risky, high risk, very high risk. And there's one data broker SDK. So these two fields two sections of the label kind of corroborate the riskiness of this thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Then we have risky behaviors in the app. And so there's 3 risky behaviors that we look at. Presence of ads, presence of behavioral ads, and the use of WebView. And I will caveat WebView. How we determine the presence of WebView is actually through manual testing and recognizing that the app is opening a web page within the app. If the app opens a web page that's from the publisher itself, we may not have caught it. We may not have detected it, depending how the look and feel and the transitions were on it. So it was a manual testing process to identify WebView. So a bit of a caveat there. And again, this app rings all the bells, unfortunately. So it's red, and the little thumb is pointing downwards because the answer is yes, and we would rather it be no. Interesting thing here nearly 85% of this category uses WebView. And that's not a surprise for these kinds of apps, because these apps there's what's called white labeled apps. So they're write once, rebrand, reskin, publish unique for every school district. Doing that through WebView lets you configure dynamically by the school itself, and you don't have to make software changes. So it's much more cost effective from a developer perspective. So highly preferred and not a surprise in here.
So do you think if we looked at all of the CEP apps by, in this case, Intrado, we would see similar behavior, like risky behavior scores and total number of SDK scores? Do you think the numbers would be similar if we looked at it on a publisher kind of breakdown?
I don't think we could expect that.
Okay.
And I mean, it might happen, but I mean, I have looked at other apps, and I have seen Intrado apps that were much better than this. So what these white labeled apps, these community engagement platforms of this kind, because they're configurable by the school usually has a dashboard that they can input any URL for the app to open for whatever purpose it serves. And we've talked to Blackboard actually about this several years ago, and suggested that they put in some guardrails around that, so that the school administrator doesn't accidentally open super risky websites. I don't know if anybody's doing anything along those lines, but what that means, to answer your question, is that because there's such configurability to it on a school basis, or a district administrator basis, I would expect to see quite a lot of variation in here. I would expect to see WebView across the board, yes. I would also expect to see ads, most likely, but I don't know about that. It'd be a good research thing. We should write that up.
Yeah, I'll write that one down on my notepad.
Yeah, please do. Add that to the list in our spare time.
Right.
Okay. So the last section here is on user data, and this is us just starting to scratch the surface on user data. What we have done is we've categorized, we've come up with our own categorization of what we call sensitive permissions. And these sensitive permissions are groupings of exactly what it sounds like, sensitive permissions. And so this app has, I think, just about all of them. I think there are about 8, and that looks like there's 7 in there. 1, 2, 3, yeah. So this one, again, ticks all the boxes on every kind of risky permission that is there. All right, so that's the summary, which is already kind of a lot. But if you want even more, you can keep scrolling on our label. And it mirrors the structure, the high-level structure, those 4 sections of the summary. And the first section here, we get into some details on the third-party sharing, and we start with the observed network traffic. And here are, see, we did add Microsoft. I knew it.
Yeah,
there are 7. In our April release, we added Microsoft into the mix, so there are 7. And so the one that this one is missing is Apple, which
makes sense.
Think makes sense. Yeah. Okay. So now you know exactly who those 6 platforms are. And now the next big section is all of those subdomains, nearly 500 subdomains. We identified the company that we believe owns those domains. And so what you're looking at here are the unique companies sorted by risk, and you're going to see a slightly different risk score here. So already you might see that the little stop sign says critical risk. That's not very high risk.
Like,
That's something different.
it's different language.
Yeah. Well, what we did is we introduced 4 tiers in the scoring of the subdomains and the SDKs. We are working on adding a 4th tier into our app scoring. Why? Because we need to distinguish apps that are really, really, really bad, like this one.
Yeah.
Versus apps that are kind of industry norm bad. So we need to add another layer in. But you'll see those 4 scores in the network traffic here and then in the SDKs. So you're going to see a lot of company names in here. You're going to see the number of domains, subdomains that were there. You're going to see our categorization of the subdomains. And you can see here, like if we look at Lotomy, they have 3 subdomains, 2 of which are advertising and marketing, and 1 is ad tracking. And then the last column is the percent of the traffic, really, that is going to that entity. And so one thing that you can see right away in this critical risk area is just how many of these are advertising. I would say probably all of them are advertising related from what I can see here. And that's not a surprise.
Yeah, that.
So this is an enormous amount of advertising, and you can see some data brokers in here too through this list. So why don't we keep going through this journey of all these companies? So here's the next category, high risk. And again, you can see a lot of advertising, a little bit less. Might be wondering why that is. We have subcategories. We have a lot of subcategories for the advertising and marketing main category. We're not exposing all those here, but we do have them, and they reflect in the scoring. So one thing, for instance, analytics comes under this advertising and marketing, and depending on the maker and the vendor of the analytics, they might not be that critical risk as some of these other more strictly monetization companies. But again, you see a lot of marketing related companies.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's keep going unless you have something.
It just makes me wonder how when it comes to advertising and seeing all these ad calls on the app, it makes me wonder how many ads were actually present on the app, because anytime the real-time bidding process happens, if you have one app or one ad space versus 3, 4, 5 ad spaces, you're going to start seeing these numbers just explode. So I see stuff like this, and my first thought is this thing must have a lot of ads.
It's a great experiment.
Yeah.
Because I would not be surprised if it doesn't. I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, yes, how many how many licks does it take to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop, whatever, how many, maybe a few ads is all it takes to stimulate that, an enormous amount of traffic to advertising entities. I think that's an interesting experiment for us.
Yeah. Well, and I think it also depends on which pages in the app, because we were manually testing how many of the pages themselves had ads, because every time you load a new page, there's a new bidding process for that ad space.
That's a great point. Remember, this one has Max Preps and WebView,
Yep.
so they're opening web pages that are probably, I take it all back. You're probably spot on. It's probably riddled with ads. The stuff they're opening, I mean, we know Max Preps has a lot of advertising in it.
Yeah.
The stuff they're opening probably has a lot of ads in it. Yeah. But we probably should record more specifically how many ads we see and whether they're in, web view pages or if they're in the native app itself kind of thing.
Well, but I mean, even then, that doesn't get into the ideas of like pixel tracking
Yeah.
or stuff like that, where we don't see it until we get into the network traffic.
Yeah.
It's difficult.
And again, like if they're opening these pages, if our tester went into Max Preps and did a bunch of stuff in Max Preps, that could have stimulated an enormous amount of both pixels and just ads and all kinds of scripts. Who knows?
Well, yeah, especially if it was opening Max Preps in a web view on the app itself, where you don't necessarily realize that you are on the internet at large. I could absolutely see that.
Yeah. Should we explain why we consider web view a risk?
Yeah, we can get into it. I think. Yeah, but by all means.
Well, the biggest thing for which we've written about before, and this is also in the help on App Microscope, but the biggest problem with WebView is that it launches this headless browser within the app, but it's a prescribed default browser. It is not your default browser, the one that you have painstakingly selected as your default browser and configured with your great privacy settings, which I hope you have. I hope you're using a good browser with the privacy settings set to 11. But the browser that gets invoked in WebView is not that browser. And that's one of the biggest problems we have with it, because this would be a lot better even if it were doing all this, if you were using a browser that was blocking tracking and stuff, at least you'd have some defenses against this. So that's one of the reasons why. Anyway, you want to add anything to that? You want to take
no? I mean,
that was angle?
Yeah. I was going to jump into the security part.
Yeah.
Once you are in the internet at large, obviously the security risks become a lot greater. You don't have a lot of control over where people are navigating. With respect to children in ed tech, it's easier for them to bypass things like firewall settings and sort of blacklisted sites if you're going through a WebView website.
Interesting. Yeah, and I think that there are also some documented risks, security risks, with the WebView APIs themselves.
Yes.
So, anywho. All right, well, that was the WebView rat hole. Let's come back out and keep going through this. So, again, this is an enormously long list of companies here in the medium risk. We've got a bunch of other ones, and I guess it's worth pointing out, this is an Android app, so we'd expect to see a lot of Google traffic, and you can. 7.7% here is non-trivial, and I think we saw Google above too.
Yeah, they had another 7.5% up above too.
Yeah, and that's to be expected and inspected.
Yeah, yes, that's why we're doing this. It needs to be inspected.
Yeah. All right. Okay, and then we get to our little brief, tiny smattering of some risk, third parties, and then you can see here. It's worth pointing out, you see some not scored. We're not done scoring the subdomains. There were so many of them, we're still doing them. So there were 99 in here, 20% of the traffic actually, that we haven't even done yet. So stand by, those are coming as we go. Okay, let's keep going. I'm also seeing in there that there are absolutely things we should be able to score, like LiveRamp and some of these other ones. We have to look into those. All right, nothing to see here. Move along. Okay, so the next section then is the included SDKs. So again, this is not the network traffic. These are the SDKs, and we're not allowed to present the names of the SDKs. We can only present the names of the companies who publish the SDKs, and so that's what you're seeing here. And it follows that same 4-tier scoring mechanism. I don't know. What's interesting in here, Bryce? Anything?
It's interesting, but to me it's not as interesting as the actual network traffic. And I think we'll have a blog post coming out about this soon, talking about how if you can use SDKs as a proxy for network traffic, and little teaser, you can't.
Yeah.
It's good information to have, and it's nice to see, but it doesn't replace the actual network traffic.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I mean, this is all we had
Yeah.
up until April. Like when we first launched, this is what we had in the details section with some other stuff. But the addition of the network traffic was really the meat of this, the update we did in April. So it was exciting to see that. All right, let's press on, shall we, through the rest of this
Yes.
very detailed label. Oh, I think we're at the end.
Yep,
We're at the end of the road. And so this last section is breaking down those groupings, those risky permission groups. And you can see in this section what are the exact permissions that map into our risky permission categories. So you can see that location, you're going to see, this is worth calling out, in location, you're going to see the location, like the course location and find location, but you're also going to see things like network state, Wi-Fi state, internet, Bluetooth, and Bluetooth related things, because those are also used in inferences for location detection. So in fact, Brian Krebs has something today on Wi-Fi positioning systems. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the risk associated. Yeah, so just, bonus topic for y'all to go look at. There's no one no one's governing that, really, I don't think. It's a little bit Wild Westy for my liking. But anywho, you can see the categories, and you can see, again, here's an app, and these apps usually are used for communicating information to students and parents about like bus schedules and lunch schedules and timely announcements like snow days. And also we've seen them allow students to upload photographs from school events. Yep. And things like that. So you can understand some of these permissions and why they'd be asking for them. Reading and writing the calendar starts to raise a little eyebrow for me. Find location starts to raise an eyebrow for me too.
Yeah, I mean, in the larger picture, I can understand if they're worried need to geofence the access to the app, but for something like this, I can't come up with a reason that makes a lot of sense to me.
But you can see 75% of the apps in this category are using these permissions. And in fact, I just looked at this the other day. It was something like more than 70% of the apps in the overall benchmark were using location information. Across the board. It was the highest permission that we saw, location. So that was disturbing. So that's a label.
That is a label, yes.
Have we been doing this for 3 hours? I felt like that was a long one.
I think we're under 40 minutes. That's
not bad.
Yeah, that's not even a sitcom. You're good.
All right. Well, yeah, so that's a label. And that's really all we have for today. We really wanted to introduce the structure of it, and we're going to start looking at more of these with more people. If you want us to look at a particular app, reach out to us on our website. There's all different kinds of ways to connect to us from there. Let us know what you're interested in seeing. If you want to come and unbox a label with us, also let us know. We're open to that. And thanks for your time if you've made it through this far.
Hopefully it was informative.
I hope so, yeah. Leave us comments.
Yes, please. Let us know.
All right. I think we're done.
All right. Thanks.